A 2-year-old girl adorably steals popcorn from Keanu Reeves, and his reaction will melt your heart. Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers, and stay tuned until the end of the video. It all began at the premiere of a highly anticipated movie in the heart of Los Angeles in December 2023. Keanu Reeves, beloved by millions for his humility and kindness, was quietly sitting in the front row, enjoying a rare moment of peace. Little did he know, his most memorable encounter of the night wouldn't come from fans or photographers, but from an unexpected source. A fearless popcorn-loving toddler named Sophie Bennett, a curious 2-year-old with golden curls and big blue eyes, had attended the premiere with her mother, Emily. Emily, a single mom in her early 30s and an aspiring screenwriter, had scored 2 tickets thanks to a lucky industry connection. She brought Sophie along, hoping for a memorable evening, though not in the way it unfolded. Seated just 3 seats away from Keanu, Sophie became captivated by the buttery scent of his popcorn. Unfazed by the sea of adults and flashing cameras, she wobbled over to him and, without hesitation, reached into his popcorn bucket. The crowd froze for a moment, unsure of what would happen. Keanu's reaction was to break into the warmest, most genuine smile anyone had seen. Rather than being upset, he leaned down, whispered something that made Sophie giggle, and offered her the bucket. What no one realized was that Sophie's innocent gesture stirred a wave of memories for Keanu, a bittersweet echo of time spent with his own sister as a child, long before life grew so complicated. Emily, mortified, rushed to retrieve Sophie, apologizing profusely. But Keanu stopped her. "It's okay," he said in his characteristically calm manner, crouching down to Sophie's level. "Popcorn tastes better when it's shared." His simple yet profound words reflected the kind of person he was, a man who found beauty in small, human connections. Sophie, unaware of the magic happening around her, sat comfortably on Keanu's lap, munching popcorn. Keanu couldn't take his eyes off her as she laughed, her tiny hands scooping up handfuls of popcorn. In that brief moment, her joy and innocence reminded him of someone he had lost, his younger sister Kim, who had passed away from leukemia years before. Kim had been about Sophie's age when Keanu first taught her to share popcorn during their movie nights together. The bittersweet memory overwhelmed him, and he felt his throat tighten. Emily noticed his expression shift for just a second. "Are you okay?" she asked softly, her voice barely audible over the murmurs of conversation around them. Keanu nodded, managing a faint smile. "She reminds me of someone," he said. "I miss her," he added, his voice tinged with a tenderness that was both comforting and heart-wrenching. Sensing the weight of his words, Emily didn't press further. As the premiere continued, Keanu stayed close to Emily and Sophie, chatting as though they were old friends. Emily, who had been struggling as a single mother since Sophie's father left them before she was born, felt an unexpected sense of peace in his presence. There was something about him, his humility, his warmth, that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't in years. When the event ended, Keanu insisted on escorting them to their car, shielding them from the paparazzi waiting outside. In the parking lot, under the glow of the streetlights, Emily hesitated before speaking. "I don't know if you'll remember tonight in a week or a month," she began, her voice trembling. "But you've made this night special for my daughter and for me too." Keanu glanced at Sophie, who had fallen asleep in her mother's arms, clutching a small handful of popcorn. "I'll remember it," he said quietly. "Moments like this are why I keep going." Emily felt tears well up in her eyes. "You have no idea how much this means to us." Keanu paused, as if carefully considering his next words. "If you ever need someone to talk to, or if you just want to bring Sophie to the movies again." He handed her a folded piece of paper. "Call me Em." After he walked away, Emily unfolded the paper. It wasn't just a phone number, it was also an address. A handwritten note read, "To New Beginnings. Let's keep sharing popcorn." In the days that followed, Emily wrestled with whether to reach out. She didn't want to seem like just another fan trying to force her way into his life. But one night, while Sophie hugged her stuffed bunny and asked about the popcorn man, Emily made a decision. She sent a letter to the address, pouring her heart out. She wrote about her struggles as a single mom, the dreams she had set aside, and the unexpected comfort she had found in their brief meeting. She didn't expect a response. But 2 weeks later, a small package arrived at her door. Inside was a handwritten note from Keanu. "Life has been hard for both of us. Perhaps we can help make it a little easier for each other. How about some popcorn this Saturday? Just the three of us." Emily sat down, her hands trembling and tears streaming down her face. She wasn't sure if this marked the start of something extraordinary, or if it was just a passing act of kindness from a man who had endured more pain than most could imagine. But she did know one thing. For the first time in years, she felt like she wasn't walking this path alone. Saturday came faster than Emily expected. She spent the morning pacing her small apartment, unsure whether Keanu would actually show up or if the gesture had simply been a fleeting moment of kindness. She reminded herself not to get her hopes too high. But at exactly 3 o'clock, there was a soft knock at the door. When she opened it, Keanu stood there, holding a giant tub of popcorn and a bouquet of daisies. His signature black jacket was gone, replaced by a simple gray sweater, and his smile was warm, almost shy. "I wasn't sure if the daisies were too much," he said, awkwardly extending them. Emily laughed, her nerves vanishing in an instant. "They're perfect. Come in." Sophie, who had been coloring on the living room floor, looked up and shouted, "The popcorn man!" She ran over, wrapping her small arms around his legs. Keanu crouched down to her level and handed her the popcorn bucket. "For you, young lady," he said, ruffling her curls. What followed was a surprisingly ordinary afternoon. They watched Sophie's favorite animated movie, pausing it every few minutes as she insisted on pointing out her favorite scenes. Keanu didn't seem to mind. In fact, he appeared genuinely interested, asking questions and laughing at Sophie's wide-eyed explanations. For Emily, the scene felt surreal. There sat one of the world's most famous men, cross-legged on her worn-out carpet, sharing popcorn with her daughter as if they had known each other for years. Yet beneath her gratitude, a flicker of doubt arose. Why would someone like him be interested in their lives? Later, after Sophie fell asleep on the couch, Emily finally voiced the question that had been nagging at her. "Why us? Why are you here?" Keanu's smile faded. He leaned back and stared at the ceiling for a long moment before responding. "Because I know what it's like to feel as though the world has moved on without you," he said quietly. "To feel alone." His voice faltered slightly, and Emily's heart ached at the vulnerability in his tone. Keanu began sharing pieces of his past. Losing his best friend River Phoenix at a young age, the unimaginable pain of losing his daughter Eva, and later his mother, Jennifer Syme. "I've spent years trying to make sense of so much loss," he admitted. "And sometimes someone like Sophie comes along." And inside was a simple but elegant ring. Keanu took a deep breath and met Emily's gaze, his eyes filled with a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. "Emily," he began softly, "I don't know where life is taking us. I don't have all the answers. But I do know that since the day we met, you and Sophie have brought something back into my life that I thought I had lost forever. Hope, joy, and a reason to look forward to each day." Emily's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, it felt as though the world had gone silent except for the sound of her own heartbeat. "Keanu," she whispered, her voice trembling. She wasn't sure what to say, wasn't sure if she was ready. But then she looked at him. This man who had come into their lives so unexpectedly, who had given her daughter laughter and her heart a sense of peace it hadn't felt in years. She realized that despite all her doubts, all her fears, there was something she couldn't deny. Sophie, still clutching the dandelion stem, peered up at them with wide, curious eyes. "What's happening?" she asked, her voice breaking the stillness. Keanu smiled at her and then looked back at Emily. "Emily," he said, his voice steady and clear now, "will you let me be a part of your life, for however long the journey takes us? Will you marry me?" Emily's tears spilled over as a wave of emotion washed through her. The little doubts and questions in her mind melted away, replaced by a deep, certain warmth. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking. "1,000 times yes." Keanu slid the ring onto her finger, his hand steady despite the emotion reflected in his gaze. Sophie threw herself onto his lap, shouting with joy, and Keanu wrapped his arms around them both, holding them as if they were the most precious treasures in the world. But their story didn't end there. In the weeks that followed, their engagement became a source of joy and healing, not just for them, but for everyone who knew them. Keanu, known for his quiet solitude, seemed to radiate a newfound light. He brought Emily to film sets, introducing her to people who could help her rekindle her screenwriting career. In turn, Emily helped Keanu open up in ways he never had before. They spent long nights talking about their pasts, their fears, and their dreams. She listened without judgment, giving him a safe space to grieve and to grow. On their wedding day, a small, intimate gathering at a Napa Valley vineyard, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. Sophie, wearing a flower crown, acted as the ring bearer, proudly walking down the aisle with a tiny basket of petals. When Keanu and Emily exchanged their vows, their words weren't just promises. They were acknowledgments of the pain and losses that had brought them to this moment, and of the love that had sustained them. "I promise to share every piece of popcorn with you," Keanu said, drawing laughter from the guests. Then his voice turned serious. "And I promise not to take a single moment for granted, because you and Sophie are my everything." Emily's vows were equally moving. "I never thought I'd find someone who could love me just as I am, scars and all. But you came into our lives and showed me that love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, even when it's hard. I will spend the rest of my life showing up for you." As they kissed, sealing their vows, the guests erupted into applause. But for Emily and Keanu, the noise faded into the background. All that mattered was the life they were beginning together. A life built on love, resilience, and the unshakable belief that even the most broken hearts can find their way home. And as Sophie tugged at Keanu's hand, asking for another round of popcorn, the three of them laughed, knowing this was only the beginning of their beautiful, imperfect, and extraordinary adventure. Thank you for watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Keanu's decision. Please leave a comment below, and I'll respond to all your messages. If you enjoyed this story, I have many more tales of resilience and hope. Subscribe to the channel for more, and here's my chosen bonus story. I hope you like it. Happy watching. Black elderly man humiliated at the bank. Luckily, Vin Diesel was there. Before we continue the story, tell us in the comment below, where are you watching from? And if you like these kinds of stories, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow at 7 p.m. we have an amazing fresh story lined up for you. Some stories begin in the most ordinary places on a regular day, yet they end up revealing the truest parts of human nature. That was exactly what happened one late afternoon at the First Pacific Bank on Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles. The bank was packed, with long lines stretching from the service counters to the entrance. Customers shifted impatiently, checking their watches and whispering frustrated complaints under their breath. The air was heavy with tension, and the employees rushed back and forth, trying to keep up with the chaos. Behind the counter, Brittany Wallace, a young bank teller with tired eyes and an impatient demeanor, typed away at her computer. She had been at her job long enough to know which customers mattered and which ones didn't, and she had already decided that the older man standing in front of her was not one that deserved much attention. Carl Jenkins, a 73-year-old retired schoolteacher, stood quietly, clutching an envelope in his slightly trembling hands. He had always been independent, never one to ask for favors or handouts, but today he had come seeking answers. He had noticed unexpected fees deducted from his account, small amounts, but enough to make a difference in his already tight monthly budget. Living on a fixed pension, every dollar mattered. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward, trying to keep his voice steady. "Good afternoon," he said politely. "I believe there's been a mistake in my account. I've been charged fees I wasn't informed about." Brittany barely looked up, her fingers still tapping at her keyboard. "Those are standard account maintenance fees, sir," she replied flatly. Carl hesitated, holding out his receipt. "But I've had this account for years, and I've never had these charges before." Brittany sighed dramatically, finally glancing at him with clear annoyance. She grabbed the envelope from Carl's hands, flipped through the papers half-heartedly, and then shoved them back toward him. "It's in the fine print of your agreement. If you didn't read it, that's not our fault." Carl blinked, taken aback. Brittany rolled her eyes, loud enough that a few people in line chuckled quietly. Carl felt his cheeks warm with embarrassment. "Look," Brittany continued with an exaggerated tone, "if you want to avoid fees, you need to keep more money in your account. That's how banks work, sir." The public humiliation had begun. Carl's throat tightened. He wasn't trying to argue. He just wanted fairness. He had been a loyal customer for decades, but as he looked around, he noticed how no one was willing to meet his eyes. The same strangers who had been loudly complaining about their own long wait times were now suddenly indifferent to his struggle. "I just want to understand what happened," he said, his voice quieter but still holding on to hope. At that moment, Matt Smith, the branch manager, walked over. He had been watching the exchange from a distance, his arms crossed as if deciding whether this situation was worth his time. Matt was a man who believed that time was money, and in his mind, Carl Jenkins wasn't worth much of either. He cleared his throat and looked down at him with a thin smile. "Is there a problem here?" Matt asked, though his tone made it clear he wasn't expecting an answer. Brittany straightened her posture immediately. "No, sir," she said quickly, as if reporting to a superior officer. "Just a customer who doesn't understand our policies." Matt turned to Carl Jenkins, his polite smile never quite reaching his eyes. "Sir, we have standard fees in place. If you can't maintain the minimum balance, there's nothing we can do." Carl Jenkins squared his shoulders, gathering every ounce of dignity he had left. "I've always kept my account in good standing," he said firmly. "These fees just started appearing. All I'm asking is for someone to review them." Matt let out a short, amused chuckle. "What's in the system is in the system, sir. We don't review automated charges." The final blow came when Matt leaned slightly over the counter and, in a voice loud enough for the entire bank to hear, said, "If you can't afford the fees, maybe this bank isn't the right place for you." A sharp silence filled the room. Carl Jenkins swallowed the lump in his throat. His fingers tightened around the envelope. He had never felt so small. Then a deep, steady voice cut through the air. "Why are you talking to him like that?" The entire bank fell silent. Heads turned toward the entrance. A man in a black t-shirt, jeans, and a baseball cap stood there. He looked like any ordinary customer at first glance, but there was something about him, his posture, his voice, his presence, that made people straighten up. Matt turned slowly, his irritation flashing across his face. "And who are you to question how we handle our customers?" The man took a few steps forward, pulling off his cap. The gasps were instant. Vin Diesel. Yes, that Vin Diesel. The Fast and Furious star. The action legend. The man who had played some of the toughest, most fearless characters on screen. Staring Matt Smith down, Matt's confident stance faltered. "Mr. Diesel." Vin raised a hand slightly, cutting him off. His voice was calm but firm. "It doesn't matter who I am," he said. "What matters is why you're treating this man like this." Carl Jenkins turned to Vin, eyes wide with disbelief. Matt cleared his throat, scrambling to regain control. "Sir, this is none of your business. We have policies in place, and this gentleman doesn't meet the requirements." Vin tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. Then, with a slow, knowing smile, he asked, "Policies are an excuse to humiliate someone who's just asking for fairness?" A few customers murmured in agreement. Brittany, who had seemed so confident earlier, now glanced nervously at Matt, waiting for him to fix this mess. Vin turned back to Carl Jenkins, his voice gentler now. "Sir, what exactly is the problem? Can you show me what's going on?" Carl hesitated for a moment before handing the envelope to Vin. He took it carefully, scanning the documents inside. After a few seconds, he looked up at Matt, his expression unchanged. "This is a mistake," Vin said plainly. "These charges shouldn't be here. You're going to fix this." Matt opened his mouth, but Vin raised a hand again, stopping him. "If it's a mistake, you'll fix it," Vin continued, his voice steady. "And if it's not," his voice dropped slightly, becoming even more controlled, "then it's going to be a much bigger problem for you." Matt's face paled. Brittany fidgeted nervously. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Matt shifted his weight, glancing at Brittany as if silently asking for a way out. But Brittany had no answers. Vin crossed his arms, standing firm, waiting for a response. And for the first time that day, Matt Smith looked truly nervous. Matt Smith shifted uncomfortably under Vin Diesel's unwavering gaze. The bank manager had spent years perfecting the art of dismissing customers like Carl Jenkins, people who, in his mind, were too old or too poor to matter. But he had never expected someone like Vin Diesel to step in and challenge him. The weight of the entire room was on him now. Customers who had once ignored Carl's struggle were now alert, eyes darting between the Hollywood star and the man in the stiff suit. Vin's voice was steady, controlled. "This isn't about policies, it's about respect." He turned to Carl Jenkins, his expression softening. "Sir, you said these fees weren't here before?" Carl nodded slowly, still in disbelief that this was even happening. "I've had this account for over 30 years. I've never seen these charges before. They just appeared 2 months ago." Vin turned his attention back to Carl, raising an eyebrow. 2 months ago. So tell me, why did the maintenance fees on his account suddenly triple?" His tone was calm, but there was an edge to it that made Carl's throat tighten. Matt forced a small chuckle, trying to regain control. "Mr. Diesel, I don't think you understand how banking works. Fees are adjusted based on policies set at the corporate level. If he doesn't meet the requirements for a premium account, he incurs charges. That's how it's structured. Vin nodded, pretending to consider the explanation. Right. But tell me, Matt, do you review those charges? Do you actually check if they're correct, or do you just assume the system is always right? Matt hesitated. He knew he was walking into a trap, but there was no easy way out. The system is designed to be accurate, he said cautiously. Vin let out a short breath through his nose, an almost amused sound. So you don't check. He glanced down at the papers Carl Jenkins had given him, flipping through them quickly. Here's what I see, Carl. A man who's been banking here for decades suddenly gets hit with fees he wasn't informed about. When he asks for clarification, he's mocked and humiliated. And now you're standing here, trying to tell me it's just policy. Matt's face turned red, his fingers tapping against his forearm, a nervous habit. We follow guidelines. We don't make exceptions. Vin's expression hardened. That's where you're wrong. You do make exceptions, just not for people like him. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried through the entire bank, making Matt feel like the walls were closing in on him. Brittany, the young teller, cleared her throat, looking even more nervous. Mr. Smith, maybe we should just... Matt shot her a glare that made her mouth snap shut. He was losing control, and he knew it. Vin, however, was just getting started. He turned toward the watching crowd. How many of you have had unexpected fees show up on your accounts in the last few months? He held Carl Jenkins' papers up like evidence in a trial. At first, there was silence. Then a few hesitant hands went up. A middle-aged man in a work uniform, a young woman holding a baby, an elderly couple near the back. More hands followed. Matt's stomach dropped. This was bigger than just Carl Jenkins. Vin nodded slowly, scanning the room. So it's not just him. Interesting. He turned back to Matt. You might want to think carefully about your next words. Matt swallowed hard. He was trapped. If he kept dismissing Carl Jenkins, he'd be dismissing half the people in the room. If he admitted fault, his career could be on the line. Vin didn't give him time to think. Let me check something. He motioned toward the computer behind the counter. Since you're so sure the system is accurate, go ahead, pull up his account. Let's see those fees. Matt hesitated. Vin tilted his head. What's wrong? Thought you said everything was clear for people who pay attention. Brittany's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Matt shot her a look, but she wouldn't meet his eyes. She had no choice. With shaky hands, she pulled up Carl Jenkins' account. The screen loaded, the numbers appearing in sharp contrast against the glow of the monitor. Vin leaned in slightly, his eyes scanning the information. A slow smile crossed his face. Well, look at that. He tapped the screen lightly. The fees started 2 months ago, right after a change in bank policy, and not just to his account. He turned back toward the watching customers. How many of you have been here for more than 5 years? Several hands shot up. Vin's smile didn't fade. And how many of you started seeing new charges around the same time? More hands went up. The bank was completely silent, except for the sound of someone shifting uncomfortably near the back. Vin turned back to Matt. You see where I'm going with this? Matt's face was ashen now. Mr. Diesel, I assure you, we don't target specific people. Vin held up a hand, cutting him off. You don't. Funny, because based on what I'm seeing, the majority of these new fees are hitting elderly customers. People who are less likely to challenge them, people who might not have the energy to fight back. He exhaled sharply, shaking his head. That's not policy, Matt. That's a scam. Matt opened his mouth, then closed it again. His pulse was hammering in his ears. Vin took a step forward, his voice lowering. I don't like bullies, Carl. And I really don't like people who take advantage of the ones who deserve the most respect. He motioned toward Carl Jenkins. This man dedicated his life to teaching. He shaped minds, and you're telling me he doesn't deserve basic decency? Matt was sweating now. He knew there was no talking his way out of this. The customers were watching, the employees were watching, and worst of all, someone was recording. He spotted a young man near the front of the line holding up his phone, filming the entire thing. Vin followed Matt's gaze and let out a low chuckle. Yeah, that's right. This is going out there. So here's what you're going to do, Matt. You're going to reverse every single one of those charges, not just for him, but for every single customer affected. And then you're going to apologize. Properly. Matt's jaw clenched. His career was flashing before his eyes. Vin stepped even closer. And if you don't, He let the question hang in the air before shaking his head. Well, let's just say I'd be really interested to see how corporate reacts when they find out their branch manager made headlines for defrauding elderly customers. Matt exhaled shakily, his shoulders slumping. He turned to Brittany. "Fix it," he muttered. Brittany wasted no time. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, reversing every charge. The tension in the bank began to shift. The nervous whispers turned into quiet approval. Vin watched as the numbers changed on the screen. He turned back to Carl Jenkins, offering him a small nod. "That's more like it." Matt's face was pure defeat, but Vin wasn't done. "Now," he said, folding his arms, "let's hear that apology." Matt clenched his jaw. He swallowed hard. "Mr. Jenkins, I apologize for the misunderstanding." Vin raised an eyebrow. Matt sighed. "I apologize for the way you were treated. It was unacceptable." Carl Jenkins didn't say anything for a moment, then slowly nodded. "Thank you." Vin glanced around, making sure everyone had seen it. "That wasn't so hard, was it?" He smiled slightly, turning toward the customers. "Let this be a lesson. Speak up. Stand up. And don't let anyone make you feel like you don't matter." For the first time that day, the room filled with something other than tension. It filled with quiet admiration. And just like that, Vin Diesel turned, put his cap back on, and walked out of the bank. But the story wasn't over yet. The video would go viral, and the consequences for Matt Smith were just beginning. The moment Vin Diesel stepped out of the bank, the atmosphere inside shifted. The customers who had initially remained passive now exchanged murmurs of approval, while the employees behind the counter, including Brittany Wallace, struggled to process what had just happened. Matt Smith, the once confident bank manager, stood frozen, his face pale and his hands clenched tightly at his sides. He had lost control of the situation, and he knew it. Worse, the young man near the front of the line was still recording. Matt's heart pounded as he turned toward Brittany. "Shut that down now." Brittany hesitated, glancing between him and the computer screen where the reversed fees were still displayed. "Sir, Matt clenched his jaw. "Now." But it was too late. The young man filming, who had been quiet until now, raised his voice. "Already uploaded, buddy. You can't erase this." Matt's stomach sank. A few seconds ago, he had been in complete control, dismissing Carl Jenkins as just another elderly man who wouldn't fight back. Now his name and face were about to be all over the internet. Carl Jenkins, standing beside the counter, watched the scene unfold with a quiet but growing sense of satisfaction. For the first time since stepping foot into the bank that afternoon, he didn't feel small. He had spent his entire life teaching his students to stand up for what was right, but he had never imagined someone like Vin Diesel would step in and remind him of that lesson when he needed it most. The young man with the phone grinned. "Man, this is going to blow up. People are going to love seeing you get put in your place." Matt's pulse thundered in his ears. He grabbed his suit jacket and turned sharply, heading straight for his office. He needed damage control, and he needed it fast. But before he could disappear behind his office door, Brittany spoke up, her voice hesitant but clear. "Sir, I think we should report this." Matt froze. Brittany continued. "We were never supposed to charge those fees in the first place. If corporate sees this," Matt whirled around, his face now bright red. "You think corporate is going to back some old man over me?" He laughed bitterly, though the nervous edge in his voice betrayed him. "I've been running this branch for 8 years. They'll..." The sound of a notification alert interrupted him. Then another and another. Phones throughout the bank chimed as customers checked their screens. Carl Jenkins, confused, looked at the young man still holding his phone up. He smirked. "Told you. The video is already spreading." Matt snatched his own phone from his pocket and nearly dropped it when he saw the screen. The video was live, hundreds of shares already, comments flooding in. His name, his bank, his behavior, all captured in crystal clear clarity and now out in the world. A single word escaped his lips. "No." Customers in the lobby, now emboldened, no longer whispered. Some muttered in agreement, others chuckled under their breath, and a few outright shook their heads at Matt in disgust. He could feel the shift, the way the power dynamic had flipped. Minutes ago, Carl Jenkins had been the one looking down, ashamed. Now it was him. Then the phone rang. Brittany glanced at the caller ID, her eyes widened. "It's corporate." Matt snatched the phone from her hand. He straightened his posture, clearing his throat before pressing the device to his ear. "Yes, this is Matt Smith." The voice on the other end was curt and cold. "Mr. Smith, we need to talk. Now." Matt turned on his heel and stormed into his office, slamming the door behind him. Outside, the bank settled into an odd silence. The tension was still there, but it was different now, an expectant quiet, like the moment after a storm when the damage is being assessed. Carl Jenkins exhaled deeply, suddenly aware of how tired he felt. It was over. He looked around at the other customers, noticing that many of them still had their phones out, still whispering about what had just happened. Brittany turned toward him, her posture less rigid than before. "Mr. Jenkins, she hesitated. "I just want to say I'm sorry for how I spoke to you earlier." Carl studied her, then nodded. "I appreciate that." Brittany hesitated, then added, "And I'm really sorry you had to come here to fight for something that should have been yours in the first place." That Carl Jenkins knew was the real apology. The bank's doors opened, and for a brief moment, a hush fell over the room. Everyone instinctively turned toward the entrance, almost as if expecting Vin Diesel to walk back in and finish what he started. But it was just another customer, a woman with 2 children, looking as exhausted as any working mother on a Friday afternoon. Carl Jenkins smiled to himself. Vin Diesel didn't need to come back. He had already done what he came to do. A few days later, the full impact of that afternoon hit like an earthquake. The video of the confrontation spread faster than anyone had anticipated. News outlets picked it up, social media exploded, and within 24 hours, the First Pacific Bank's headquarters had released an official statement announcing an internal review of the branch's practices. By the end of the week, Matt Smith was removed from his position. Corporate cited a failure to uphold company values and multiple customer complaints that had suddenly gained traction following the viral video. Brittany was placed under review, but ultimately kept her job after testifying against Matt, admitting that she had been pressured into following unethical instructions. Most importantly, every single customer affected by the unnecessary fees was refunded in full. Carl Jenkins watched it all unfold from the comfort of his home. He never thought a trip to the bank would turn into something this big. But as he sat at his kitchen table, sipping tea and reading the latest headlines about Matt's dismissal, he couldn't help but feel a quiet sense of victory. Then one morning, an envelope arrived in the mail. It wasn't from the bank. It was postmarked from a film studio in Los Angeles. Inside was a single handwritten note. "Mr. Jenkins, you didn't need me to stand up for you. You already had the strength. You just needed someone to remind you. Hope this makes you smile. Vin." Tucked inside the envelope was a signed Fast and Furious poster and a personalized invitation to one of Vin Diesel's upcoming movie premieres. Carl laughed, shaking his head in disbelief. He set the note down gently, running his fingers over the signature. For the first time in a long time, he felt seen. He felt valued. He felt unstoppable. He stood up, stretched, and walked to his front door, feeling lighter than he had in years. The world wasn't perfect, but now he knew. When you fight for what's right, sometimes the right people show up to fight with you. Thank you for watching. If the story warms your heart, subscribe to the channel and click the screen for more inspirational stories of resilience, compassion, and hope. If you like the last story, here is another